Hello, GE the Worldwide, Chuck Grigsby once again. We are back at it. Today we are doing the King Project. I'm so happy that you're tuning in. I really appreciate it. I am so honored to be able to share with you a little bit of Dr. King's work. Today I chose the topic of poverty, and I will be quoting Dr. King on poverty. Here we go. There's nothing new about poverty. What is new is we now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty. The real question is whether we have the will. Dr. King had said this, I believe, in 1967, and he was on his way to Washington, D.C., and he was going to march on the Capitol under the guise of the Poor People's Campaign. Under this campaign, Dr. King was going to have thousands and thousands of people march on Washington, sit in on the buildings, the federal buildings, and just take over and stay there until legislation was passed for the Poor People's Campaign and the initiative they had about that. Dr. King was very passionate about poverty towards the end of his life, right before his demise of his death, and it was something that I think would have been maybe more of a legacy outside of even the work he had done previous to his life's work all up to that point so far. The reason why I say this is, right now, currently, based off the U.S. Census of 2015, we have 19 million people who were classified under deep poverty. And there was 43 million people classified under this term, just poverty. So when you think about the word deep poverty, the definition basically is stating that the total household cash income is 50% below the poverty threshold. To go into further detail, based off the University of Michigan National Poverty Center, they classified and looked at poverty under the World Bank definition. And what that tells us is that everyone living in a household was making $2 a day or less, $2 a day or less towards their household income. Under the study that was done from 1996 through 2011 by the University of Michigan National Poverty Center, we had in 1996 636,000 people go to 1.46 million people by the time we were in 2011. So the poverty and the poverty threshold and the classification of poverty and deep poverty has gotten much worse for most of the people in America today. This is huge because he was talking about this issue way back in the 60s, and here we are now today with more people than ever in this world under the classification of deep poverty. You know, when he made this quote, I really thought it was very impactful because, again, the quote says, "There's nothing new about poverty. What is new is we now have the techniques and resources to get rid of poverty. The real question is whether we have the will." I think that's profound because if you think about it, based on what he's doing and based on what he was thinking about, I don't think, most people had the will to be able to kind of follow through on this issue. But despite that, Dr. King was going to march on Washington. He met with the Southern Christian Leadership Committee. He was the leader of that, and his leadership team met over a 5-day period discussing how they were going to organize this march, organize this campaign, and really have effective legislation change. They were going to sit in until they got the change. And he had done this successfully through other campaigns and sit-ins and protests, nonviolent ones, if you will, and really changed history. On this particular one, though, Dr. King really wanted to make a point in making this one be his major standout piece so far up to this point, because he was very passionate about the issue of poverty. As they were planning for this conference, as they were planning during the conference for this march, King was determined to hold a nonviolent demonstration, but militant one, very dramatic, attention-seeking, and disruptive as a riot without destroying any property. So he was very, very serious and adamant about really disrupting the flow of things in D.C. and really causing a lot of people a lot of problems until this was going to be addressed head on. This is based off the Last Crusade book, 1998, published by the Arthur McKnight. Within the planning phases of the Poor People's Campaign, it was a 5-day period that he met with his leaders, as I said before, and it was a lot of controversy within that. There was a lot of dissent within his team and in the movement in itself, because within his leadership team there were a lot of people, a few people that really wanted to focus on the continuing issues that they had been working on. They wanted to really specify certain aspects like education and go into different directions, if you will, with some of the different things. And even within the march towards For the People's Campaign, some of his leadership team didn't even want to do the whole campus of Washington, D.C. They felt it was too much, and they just really wanted to focus on Pacific building or Pacific politicians. So, you know, it kind of seems like Dr. King, within his own leadership team, within his own movement, he was already moving away, and I humbly want to say that he was already leveling up to another level of change and impactful change for the world. As he was gearing up for this campaign and touring around the country and getting support and meeting with leaders and that nature, he was in Mississippi at the time, and he had this experience. He had noticed this school teacher serving lunch to the class, and what they were serving was a slice of apple and crackers, and that was under the guise of lunch. So that experience for him really was an emotional one, and it moved him to tears based on what I understand. And he actually wanted to start the march in Mississippi due to that experience that he had, but ultimately he and his leaders decided that they were going to start in D.C. and do that. Unfortunately, Dr. King was killed before he was able to march on Washington himself and really be successful, in my mind, with the Poor People's Campaign and go about change. The reason why I chose this is I just really felt like Dr. King was really ahead of his time. You know, right now, when you think about poverty, there's two classifications. There's poverty and there's deep poverty. You know, and deep poverty is kind of really where the state of most people are when you think about poverty. That's 50% below the poverty threshold. That means that everyone in the household is making $2 or less cash-oriented based income towards their life. $2 or less per family member is what they're generating. And so when you have a disparity like that, it's just really hard to be able to kind of fight your way out of that and get the resources you need to kind of really, in my opinion, be successful. I also found through doing some of this topic discussion, there was a study done by the University of Michigan National Poverty Center, and they did this study over a course of time of 1996 through 2011, and they were looking at the deep poverty topic, and they found that from 1996 through 2011, there started off 636,000 people under the deep poverty threshold, and that moved up to 1,046,000 people who now are classified under the deep poverty classification. So that's just in 2011, and here we are at 2017, and I'm very curious to kind of see where we're at now with our poverty line and our threshold when it comes to that. Dr. King was really ahead of his time. He really was passionate about this poverty issue. I really believe that ultimately, if he was able to kind of really fulfill his legacy within this topic itself, that Dr. King would probably be more well known for this accomplishment, this drive, this campaign, more so than any other thing that he had done previous to his life's work. So I chose poverty. I thought it was very impactful. I believe that it is something that it really comes down to the core of it. When it comes down, when you think about his quote, there's nothing new about poverty. What is new is now we have the techniques and resources to get rid of poverty. The real question is whether we have the will. Looking at the numbers that we have today, looking at some of the disparity that we have between the rich and poor, and some of the resources that some people have and have nots, I believe that the will to be able to do something about poverty has not been addressed in the way that it should, and I thought I'd share that with you. And And I thought I'd get that out there for you and really give you guys another perspective, a piece, another slice of what Dr. King was really focusing on and really what he was going to be about, addition to his overall legacy that he had going on. Chuck Grigsby, GED Worldwide, thanks for tuning in. This is the King Project. I'm so excited about being able to share all this good stuff with you. We got more stuff coming, and I really appreciate the fact that you guys tuned in and you're loving what we're doing, because we love you guys and we appreciate your support. Thank you.